In this presentation, we'll review the code requirements for protection of piping inside walls. Did you know that the Florida Building Code Residential 6th edition has changed one of the requirements related to pipe shielding? We'll review this change. We'll also review what is expected of you, the installer. But let's start by watching a short video clip that illustrates the importance of pipe shielding. It's important to make sure our pipes are properly protected because other trades who come in behind us do not always use care when working around our installations. It's really kind of hit and miss. Maybe a little more miss than hit though. Yeah, definitely more missing. Sometimes, despite our best efforts to protect our pipes, our work still gets damaged. This mess was created when an insulation contractor put a staple through one of our water lines that was run through here. The water lines in this area did not require shielding. Later in this presentation, we'll show you what can be done to minimize the probability of being hit by a staple. Here is the section of the code where you'll find the requirements for pipe protection. It tells you where shielding is required. Let's read it. In concealed locations, where piping other than cast iron or galvanized steel is installed through holes or notches in studs, joists, rafters, or similar members less than 1 1/4 inches from the nearest edge of the member, the pipe shall be protected by steel shield plates. The code tells you how thick the shield plates need to be. That'd be a number 16 gauge steel. And it says that such plates shall cover the area of the pipe where the member is notched or bored and shall extend not less than 2 inches above sole plates and below top plates. So look at our illustration here at the bottom. We've got a 2-inch PVC pipe and it's passing through this bottom plate or sole plate right here. If we measure it, we see that the pipe is 1 1/4 inch from the edge of that member that it's passing through. So in this case, this pipe does not need to be shielded. If it were any closer than 1 1/4 inch from the edge of the sole plate, then it would need to be shielded. But I think it'll help if we take a look at another illustration. So let's take a look at another slide. In this example, we see a pipe passing through a stud. The pipe is 1 1/4 inch away from the edge of that stud. Does the code require that the pipe be shielded? The answer is no. Remember that only pipes closer than 1 1/4 inch to the edge of the member that they're passing through require shielding. Since this pipe is 1 1/4 inches away from the edge of the stud, it does not require shielding. Be aware that this code change applies only to 1 and 2 family dwellings and townhouses not more than 3 stories in height. So in general, this change does not apply to our multi-family apartment projects and structures that are not designed to be lived in. For example, clubhouses and offices. The change does apply to single-family homes and townhouses. The following information applies to all of our work, and the current code requirements remain unchanged from previous editions of the building code. So let's go back to our code section and read the underlined portion. Of shield plates, it reads, such plates shall cover the area of pipe where the member is notched or bored, and shall extend not less than 2 inches above sole plates and below top plates. We're looking at the sole plate here. So it says that the shield must extend 2 inches above the sole plate. So you're measuring from this point up. You have to extend a minimum of 2 inches. This shield extends well beyond the 2 inches, so it's good. And it's appropriate that the shield extend a bit further than just 2 inches, because on many of our walls, if they're not tiled, they're going to get baseboard, and baseboard usually extends up about 4 inches. Here's another illustration. Here's our sole plate. The code requires that shielding extend a minimum of 2 inches above the sole plate. So that would be measured from this point here up, a minimum of 2 inches. This photo illustrates the reason why it's a good idea to extend shielding above the sole plate a little higher than the code requires. The pipe was damaged by a baseboard nail right here. The shielding depicted is installed in accordance with the code. However, even though the installation is correct, the pipe may not have been damaged if the shielding had extended a little higher than the code required minimum. Perhaps the installer could have turned the shield on in like this. Now that we understand what kind of protection the code requires for pipes passing through sole plates, it should be easy to understand what the code requires for pipes passing through top plates. This is because the requirements are essentially the same for both. The only real difference is that instead of the shield having to extend 2 inches above the sole plate, on the top plate, the shield must extend 2 inches below the top plate, which is really only common sense. Here's our top plate. Here's our shield. Of course, there's our pipe. The code says that the shield must extend 2 inches below the top plate. So we're measuring from this point here, 2 inches below the top plate, a minimum. It can extend more, but it can't extend less. In this slide, we see a top plate that consists of two 2x6s. Our installer has used a large shield to protect the pipe that's passing through the top plate. The shielding, however, is inadequate. Remember that the shielding must extend 2 inches below the top plate. And in this case, it only extends 1 3/4 of an inch. So what could be done a little differently here? Let's take a look at our next slide. Okay, we have the same top plate, which consists of two 2x6s, but in this instance, the installers actually used a smaller shield, and they've got better protection out of it. How did they do that? Well, they changed the orientation of the shield so that it's now lengthwise. In doing so, the shield now extends almost, 2 5/8 of an inch below the top plate, which is more than what's required. You'll notice that they offset the shield a little bit so that the screws didn't perforate the pipe. So they achieved a better result with a smaller shield. What's wrong with this picture? The pipes are installed too close to a furring strip. It's likely that they'll be damaged by either a drywall screw or a staple from the insulation contractor. Remember that both of these trades fasten their materials to these furring strips. And we know from the video at the outset that there's not a whole lot of thought put into where they search for something to screw into. When running pipes parallel to furring, you should keep a safe distance away from the furring. as a rule of thumb, you should be able to fit your hand between the pipe and the furring. If you can't fit your hand between the pipe and the furring, remove the straps and relocate the pipes so that you can. Also, think ahead. Pipes should be installed in a way that they can be properly protected. It'll be very difficult to attach the shielding for these pipes. What could our installer have done differently? Take a look at the next slide. By raising the piping a few inches, the pipes are now close enough to where the shielding for the pipes can be attached to the furring strip. Shields must be attached with enough fasteners to prevent movement. This shield can pivot, leaving the pipe unprotected. If only one end of a shield can be fastened, you must use multiple fasteners to prevent the shield from moving. Piping installed through, across, or behind backing must be properly protected. And keep in mind that cabinet installers routinely use screws that are 3 inches in length. So if pipes installed behind backing are closer than 3 inches from the face of the backing, you should protect them with a shield. Also, when shielding is installed on backing, it must cover the entire section of the backing where the pipe crosses it. You can see that the shielding here has the pipe protected where it crosses the backing. We don't want to leave any of the wood exposed in these areas. This actually extends a little beyond, which is good. Of course, the best way to prevent damage to our work is to avoid the areas where screws, staples, and nails are used whenever possible. This installer did a nice job of running their water piping away from cabinet backing and furring. Can you see where they could have improved? Notice that the water hammer arrestor is attached to the back side of the cabinet backing. Take a look at the next slide and see what could have been done differently. The water hammer arrestor didn't need to be installed vertically. Instead, if it were installed horizontally, it would be completely out of harm's way. Here's a technique that will help you accurately protect piping without missing anything. The first step is to identify areas where shields are required. You can do this by visually tracing your pipes and noting where they pass through studs, top plates, bottom plates, etc. Next, count out the amount of shields and place them next to the area where they're needed. Don't forget to use a measuring tape to determine if shielding is required. Finally, install the shields you placed on the floor. If you have any leftover shields, look for spots that you missed. After installing these leftover shields, you can feel confident that you've missed nothing. Okay, let's review. Changes to the Florida Building Code residential. They require shielding only on piping that's closer than 1 1/4 inch from the edge of the member it's passing through. The previous version of the Florida Building Code residential required shielding for pipes closer than 1 1/2 inches. So we can be 1/4 of an inch closer to the edge of a stud or what have you before we need to shield the pipe. It's important to note that this change applies only to 1 and 2 family dwellings and townhomes not over 3 stories in height. So our multifamily jobs are still permitted under the plumbing code. The plumbing code has not changed. It's still 1.5 inches from the nearest edge of the member. Okay, no change here. Shielding must extend 2 inches above the sole plate. That's the sole plate. You're measuring from this point here. The shielding must extend 2 inches above that. Always a good idea if there's going to be baseboard, and especially if you know that baseboard is going to be high, to let that shielding extend a bit beyond the code required minimum of 2 inches. Again, no change. The shielding must extend 2 inches below the top plate. This is the top plate. You're measuring from this point right here. The shielding must extend a minimum of 2 inches below the top plate. To avoid damage from staples and screws, pipes running parallel with furring strips should be at least a hand's width away from that furring strip. Okay, if you can only secure one end of a shield, make sure you've got multiple fasteners on there. There should be no movement in that shield. Pipe installed through, across, or behind backing must be properly protected. We don't want to see any wood on the edges of the backing. Your shield should cover the entire section of the backing where the pipe's passing through it. We pointed out that this one has a little bit of an overhang there, which we like. We'd like to see that. Also, to keep in mind that cabinet installers routinely use screws that are 3 inches in length. That means that if you've got a pipe behind a piece of backing and it's closer than 3 inches from the pipe to the face of the backing, you should probably put shielding on that to protect it. And of course, the best way to protect our pipes is to run them away from areas where we know that there'll be either staples or screws or something else, some other trade attaching materials to it. Cabinet backing is another one. We mentioned this scenario here where you've got a water hammer arrestor that's attached to the backside of cabinet backing. Don't like it. There's no reason that the water hammer arrestor can't be installed horizontally. You can install it horizontally, vertically, you can even install it upside down, that's fine. But we don't want to put it behind cabinet backing and then try and shield it. Let's keep it out of the way of screws, staples, and nails.